The relationship between disability and well-being is important both theoretically and practically. The way philosophers, social scientists, policymakers, and laypeople understand that relationship matters for the theories of welfare we construct, for the judgments about our lives we make on a regular basis, and for the social and health policies we adopt. I'll start by giving you an abridged version of a taxonomy of contemporary philosophical accounts of well-being. Then I'll tie this discussion of well-being to the account of disability presented in the previous lecture. My short version of the taxonomy of philosophical accounts includes 1. Hedonism, or experiential theories, which hold that the quality of a life for the person who lives it is determined completely by its experiential quality. 2. Desire theories, which hold that the quality of a person's life is a matter of the extent to which that person's desires are satisfied. 3. Objectivist or substantive good theories, which hold that there are standards for assessing the quality of a life that are not entirely dependent on the desires of the person whose life it is. Let us consider the category of disability through the lens of each type of well-being account. If, as hedonistic experiential theories hold, well-being is a matter of having positive experiences, whether disability reduces well-being depends on whether and to what extent it reduces the number of positive experiences enjoyed by persons with disabilities. According to this approach, then, the self-reports of persons with disabilities are very important in assessments of well-being, at least if we accept the assumption that people are in a better position epistemically to assess the quality of their own experiences than other people's. The second type of well-being theories that I mentioned earlier is that of desire theories. These in turn can take different forms. According to present desire theories, for example, someone is made better off to the extent that their current desires are fulfilled. A more comprehensive desire theory would claim that what matters to a person's well-being is the overall level of desire satisfaction in their life as a whole, while a global desire theory ranks desires so that desires about the shape and content of one's life as a whole are given some priority. These theories also give weight to self-reports of persons with disabilities, accepting that such persons might shift their goals in light of discovering or acquiring a disability, and subsequently also change their desires in a way that might not negatively affect their well-being. Finally, objectivist theories assess well-being in terms of a set of goods and activities that are said to be objectively good for people. Such theories typically suggest a simple checklist for assessing well-being: health, nourishment, shelter, sex, mobility, the ability to use one's senses, the ability to imagine, to think and reason, to form family and other relationships, attachments and love, to live a life one has thought about and in some way chosen, to laugh and play, and to live in contact with the natural world. But supporters of objectivist theories of well-being also recognize that there is an irreducible plurality in the goods of life and that their contribution to well-being cannot be expressed in terms of a common metric like utility. So given that several of the items on such objective lists cannot be enjoyed by many people with disabilities, and assuming that if high levels of well-being cannot be attained by someone who cannot enjoy all of the items on the list, then it seems to follow that high levels of well-being are not attainable by many people with disabilities. Is it possible to draw a sharp distinction between subjective and objective theories of well-being? Even if we grant the significance of objective goods for well-being, it is not only their possession that makes a life go well. Also relevant is how a life seems to the person living it, and this reintroduces subjective elements. Common sense supports the view that individual well-being must have a subjective as well as an objective path. Well-being consists partly in having certain substantive goods and partly in being happy or being content with or enjoying or taking pleasure in one's life. But our question is whether these aspects are easily separable or not. It seems that the positive valuation of objective goods may always be necessary for the possession of those goods to count towards well-being, or for their absence to count against it. Also, any plausible objective list must include enjoyment or pleasure either as a freestanding good or as an aspect of value states, activities, or relationships. Why does it matter which account of well-being we subscribe to when we want to understand disabilities and the social and moral issues to which they give rise? Assumptions about well-being are linked to how we view and value disability in a number of ways and in a number of bioethical contexts. For instance, when people make decisions about abortion after a positive prenatal test result, or when they make decisions about life-sustaining treatment for severely disabled infants, like in neonatal care, or for critically ill adults. Also, they matter when we make judgments of well-being in allocation decisions, where scarce resources may be diverted away from persons who, because of certain disabilities, are deemed to have poor prospects for an acceptable quality of life, and towards persons with better prospects. Let us look in more detail at some bioethical decisions in which the link between theories of well-being and disability is more obvious, because commitment to a particular well-being will yield specific recommendations of how to deal with persons with disabilities, both morally and in terms of the impact that these social decisions have more broadly. Take the case of reproductive testing. Some prospective parents see life with some disabilities as worse than no life at all. Their judgment about the extent to which a disabling condition reduces well-being depends on the view of well-being that is adopted. In the case of prenatal testing, there is an additional complication as there is a massive uncertainty about how the detected genetic variants will be expressed in the developing child. That depends on their interplay with other genes and interaction with a variety of environments. Or take the case of withdrawal of life support from disabled newborns. Decisions here concern whether withdrawal of life support should be considered morally acceptable for very premature and disabled newborns. The practical concern is that decisions about life support, whether made by parents or caretakers, often rely on inaccurate or misleading medical indicators of expected well-being, resulting in significant discrimination against newborns with disabilities. It is true that the accuracy of medical prediction may improve after birth, but it remains difficult to assess the potential of a neonate to develop higher cognitive functions. Similarly, the prediction of the course of physical disabilities has improved, but that improvement offers only a partial safeguard against the tendency of many parents and health professionals to exaggerate the hardships of life with a physical disability. What about scenarios where end-of-life decisions are involved? Assumptions about the link between disability and well-being play an important role when the individual is no longer capable of deciding for themselves whether to receive, continue, or refuse life-sustaining treatment, and when an individual is granted permission to end their life. For adults once capable of making such decisions, two standards seem to apply to surrogate decision-making: substituted judgment and best interest. Substituted judgment involves judging what the individual would have wanted or chosen if they could want or choose for their current situation. The second involves judging the person's interest by a standard other than their own. In cases where the adult never had decisional capacity and there is no basis for making a judgment about what the patient would have chosen, the best interest standard will apply. The main concern in this scenario is that those who judge the best interests of such an adult are prone to the same errors of projection as non-disabled people judging the well-being of disabled people. Another area where it matters which theory of well-being one adopts is when one considers the project of developing health-related quality of life measures. It has been argued that it is useful to have quantitative measures for well-being for judging the cost-effectiveness of medical interventions. Quality of life measures in medicine and healthcare are said to offer benchmarks for assessing the well-being of groups of people, focusing on the aspects of well-being most amenable to reliable assessment. Of course, there is no guarantee that individuals who are doing well by such measures are actually living good lives according to more robust philosophical theories of well-being, since any uniform metric for quality of life will provide an oversimplified assessment of an individual's well-being. The main worry here is that when these judgments are applied to people with disabilities, it's not that they are oversimplified, but rather that there is a systematic bias involved. Implicit in the discussion so far is the assumption that disability involves not mere difference, but bad difference. And this is true for most interactions between theories of well-being and accounts of disabilities. But what if we endorse an account of what a disability is that is affirmational or positive? The affirmational conception of disabilities, which is nowadays adopted by many disability rights activists, claims that disability is not, by itself, something bad, harmful, or suboptimal. This disability positive conception goes against philosophically more common views that maintain that disability is by itself something that makes people worse off. According to such traditional bad difference views of disability, not only is having a disability bad for someone, having a disability would still be bad for that person even if society was fully accommodating of disabled people. Bad difference views are often taken for granted and considered to be the most intuitive. In contrast, positive or mere difference views of disability say that having a disability makes you non-standard or different, but it doesn't by itself make you worse off. Be careful, because it is consistent with the mere difference view that the actual well-being of disabled people is, on average, lower than that of non-disabled people, simply because of how society treats disabled people. Also, the mere difference view acknowledges that disability involves a loss of some goods. What it denies is that disability should be understood only in terms of being something that makes one worse off or making someone lose some goods. Establishing what exactly distinguishes mere difference views of disability from bad difference views, again, will depend on the background view of well-being that one adopts. But here are some general points that can be said about the distinction between the two. First, depending on whether one holds a subjective or objectivist view of well-being, bad difference views of disability might hold something like the following. 1. Disability is something that is an automatic or intrinsic cost to one's well-being. Were society fully accepting of disabled people, it would still be the case that for any given disabled person, X, and arbitrary non-disabled person, Y, such that X and Y are in relevantly similar personal and socioeconomic circumstances, it is likely that Y has a higher level of well-being than X. And also that for any arbitrary disabled person X, if you could hold X's personal and socioeconomic circumstances fixed, but remove their disability, you would thereby improve their well-being. Now, mere difference views of disability will deny these criteria and their converses, and in addition will hold the following positive claims about disability, namely that disability is similar to features like sexuality, gender, ethnicity, and race. Disability is not a defect or departure from normal functioning. Disability is a valuable part of human diversity that should be celebrated and preserved. And finally, that a principal source of the bad effects of disability is society's treatment of disabled people rather than disability itself. Notice that these criteria endorsed by mere difference views are not essential, but they give it more substance. Mere difference views of disability can be also understood simply as opposing different formulations of bad difference views. One common argument raised by philosophers against mere difference views of disability is the following. If disability were mere difference rather than bad difference, it would be permissible to cause disability. But it is obviously impermissible to cause disability, therefore disability is not mere difference, it is bad difference. It is also often argued that the mere difference view is implausible because it would make impermissible to remove disability. How can we respond to this argument? We can say that the mere difference view of disability does not license the permissibility of causing disability or the impermissibility of removing disability. Remember, according to the mere difference view, some cases of causing disability are morally impermissible, but not for the reasons relating to disability directly. Rather, they are wrong because they involve unjustified interference or unjustified risk-taking with respect to someone else, such as when causing someone to become blind. Also, the mere difference view acknowledges that some cases of causing disability are morally permissible in a non-problematic way, such as deciding to carry to term a pregnancy and give birth to a child with a disability. In making judgments about what is morally permissible and what it isn't, the mere difference view acknowledges that there is an important difference between being disabled and becoming disabled. So, while many people find being disabled a rewarding and good thing, there is an almost universal experience for those who acquire disability, variously called adaptive process or transition costs, of great pain and difficulty associated with becoming disabled. In contrast with all of the things we said about mere difference views, bad difference views of disability can say that most, if not all, cases of causing disability are impermissible precisely because they cause a disability. Think about the fact that more generally, we do not think that the inference from X is mere difference to causing X is permissible is a good inference. So by analogy, we shouldn't accept the inference from disability is mere difference to causing disability is permissible. This should undermine the strongest version of the argument against the mere difference view, according to which, if we accept the mere difference view, we are committed to consider morally permissible all instances of causing disabilities, or to consider morally impermissible all instances of removing disability. Let's wrap up and bring together the accounts of disability, accounts of well-being, and the effects of their interaction. Definitions of models of disability belong on a continuum between naturalist and social constructivist views. We saw that naturalist views hold that disability is primarily determined by some intrinsic feature of one's body, while social constructivist views claim that disability is mainly the result of the oppression and prejudice that social structures or institutions create against people with non-standard bodies. Both naturalist and social constructivist views have been criticized for over and under-generalizing. They just don't do justice to all types of disabilities that are out there. The solidarity model of disability follows disability rights activists in defining disability partly in terms of what somebody's body is like, but it also recognizes that disability is socially constructed. A group of people make solidarity judgments based on the things their bodies and their experience of those bodies are. Those judgments are rule-based, and it is the application of those rules that determine what counts as a disability. Accounts of disability can be linked with different theories of well-being, hedonic theories, desire theories, or objective list theories, to yield different prescriptions for difficult bioethical cases such as screening and embryo selection with predicted disabilities, neonatal care for infants with disabilities, end-of-life decisions of persons with disabilities, developing health-related quality-of-life measures, and applying them to treating persons with disabilities. Mainstream bad difference views of disability and mere difference views of disabilities cannot be distinguished only on the grounds of whether they deem causing disability or removing disability morally permissible or not. But an advantage of mere difference views is that they capture the concept of disability pride, which is gaining increasing importance in the disability rights movement.